Hey Pete,
Hey Matt.
welcome to the podcast, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, good mate. It's nice to join you.
Yeah, it's good to talk. We chatted a few weeks ago, but good to connect again.
Yeah,
Normally when I do these podcasts, I do a bit of an intro, which I'll do, but I certainly wouldn't do yours justice. And I think a really good starting point would just get a snapshot, just get some insight into your background, your career, which I know the stuff we're going to talk about today, it has all
yeah,
been motivated about stuff that's happened for years. So yeah, maybe just start with a kind of snapshot of yourself and your life and stuff.
yeah. Sure, Matt. So, for 20 odd years, I was with New South Wales Police here in Australia, and spent most of that time as a forensic investigator. So that was in investigating scenes of homicides and major crime and suspicious deaths and so forth, and that was basically my trade. I spent 10 years in regional New South Wales and came back to Sydney in 2002, and that was the year of the Bali bombings, and I was deployed to Bali as part of the international leadership contingent to identify those who died, to investigate the scene and so forth, and I spent some time over in Bali, then returned to Australia. Then, of course, a big turning point was the Boxing Day tsunami in 2004. And after the experience I'd had in Thailand, I was sent to Thailand as part of the international contingent. And I was the leader of the Australian team and leader of an international site, identifying the 5,395 bodies that we recovered to send home, and spent most of 2005 either in Thailand or deploying teams to Thailand. And then 2007, I was seconded to work for Interpol in Lyon in France on a counter-terrorism project, and spent 12 months basically researching and writing a secret paper on the threats and trends around chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear threats in counter-terrorism, in the terrorism space. And from that time at Interpol in Lyon in France, I was then asked to spend some time with the UN Office of Drug and Crime in Southeast Asia in a capacity building role around leadership and counter-terrorism. And at the end of that, I resigned from the police and started doing my own thing, and then worked in, I was engaged by the government of Saudi Arabia to work in the city of Jeddah after some deadly floods there, really around capacity building and structure around crisis mitigation for the government there, and worked in Japan after the 2011 tsunami. And so that's kind of that side of it. And then, as you know, and as we connected, it was really through the start of where all my love and passion goes now, really, is with the charity I started called Hands Across the Water, which was, I met a group of kids in Thailand on my last rotation who'd all lost their parents and were living in a tent, and decided to do something to see if we could raise some money, and started Hands, came back to Australia. Then a collective group of people raised some money, built a home, and I guess a real turning point was when we went to open the home. And it was, for me, it was, well, then who supports them now? What happens now? And that was where the long-term commitment was made, and find ourselves 15 years on. The challenges are bigger than they've ever been in supporting those communities that we support today.
Yeah, I mean, is that really 15 years on? Like, I'm feeling
Yeah,
my age now, but that literally that was, Kundra round a
yeah,
tree with a number of orphans, and now that is, how many orphanages and children, and what's the size today? That's hugely expanded since that time, right?
Yeah, it certainly has got a lot bigger. It's like we started with that one home, and now we're in 7 different locations in Thailand and spread all over the map. And as you know, as a resident of Thailand, getting round, you're kind of in and out of Bangkok, so it makes it challenging to visit all of the locations. But we get there, and there's about 350 kids who are residents across the 7 properties, and we've got, we've been supporting kids through university for quite a while. We've got a growing alumni of kids that have graduated, and the thing for us is we measure really our success in the choices they have when it comes time to leave, as opposed to number of properties or number of homes, because, Matt, I think it's without question the best place for kids, in all things being equal, is within a family.
Sure.
When that doesn't exist, well, that's the type of facilities that we provide is an alternate. And we have the government bring kids to us, a hospitals course, a police course, and ask us to take on kids who seemingly have no other option. And but as I say, the real success for us would be having none of those residential homes and focusing on the long-term education and skill development of the kids, which is where we're at with a lot of our time now.
Yeah, for sure. I just going back to, those times in Thailand, which were 15 years ago. I mean, I imagine, things are very different now for you both, individually. I mean, there must have been some big shifts in your life at a personal level going through that. I've had a little bit of exposure to it, but certainly nowhere near to the scale you have. I mean, can you talk a bit about that? What that experience of coming into Thailand, I mean, everyone remembers that who is, old enough to remember it. It was a shocking time, and it went on, for a long time afterwards. And you were in the thick of it, identifying the foreign bodies or Australian bodies, right?
All of them.
And yeah.
All of them.
So just, tell us about them. What is the effect on that, at a personal level? How does that emotionally affect you? And what do you bring away from a situation like that?
Yeah, it's certainly been exposed to something like that. You remain forever changed, and in both positively and not so positively ways. And I talk about the impact personally was that there's the only thing that remained the same for me from going to Thailand and coming back was that I've got 3 kids. Nothing else remains the same,
Wow.
what it meant on a personal level, and then my work level, and everything changed as a result of that time in Thailand. And I'd like to think that the impact has been more positive than negative. And arriving and flying into Takua Pa on a police helicopter and landing in the schools of the grounds of a school there, and you could smell the death. There was 3,500 decomposing bodies at a temple called Wat Yan Yao, and the smell of death is unmistakable once you know it, and we could smell that before we saw or arrived at the temple. And arriving at the temple, there was 3,500 bodies on the ground, and they were in an advanced state of decomposition. And the question that you posed was it Australians or foreign nationals that were identifying? Well, until they're identified, you don't know.
Yeah,
And
right, for sure.
so the process is just to identify absolutely everyone. And there was the only priority that we attached was to kids. The work that we did, we started with the kids to return them to their loved ones throughout the world and throughout Thailand. And Matt, there was some amazing experience meeting some of the families, both Thai and foreign nationals and Australians who had lost, loved ones. There was some moments that will stay with me forever, and I felt incredibly privileged to be there. And and I think where we are now with Hans, people have asked me previously, was it this almost a response to what we'd seen in so much bad was to create something good. And it wasn't that. It was just that meeting the kids and then being invited by a colleague I'd worked with from the UK to do something, it just made sense. And then starting made sense. And I guess it's the reason why we've always continued, is that we've got the capacity, and I feel it would be wrong and selfish to stop. And, these kids that we support throughout Thailand, they didn't choose to be born into circumstances that they're in. And, so many of the communities and kids that we support now have no direct correlation to the tsunami. Of the 7 properties, there's only one of them that is directly related to the tsunami. And as we know, 15 years on, there's not many kids now who are of that tender age who were directly affected. And the ability and the opportunities we've had, has certainly been positive for me. And I'm richer now in every measure of life because of hands. Is just a good thing, I guess.
Yeah, many of those kids, like you said, I mean, that's 15 years ago. So, I mean, when I visited, that it was probably 2 years, I can't remember, a year and a half after you'd established the initial orphanage. And so most of the kids there at that time were, in fact, pretty much all of them, apart from some coming in, off the street, were from the tsunami. But now, I mean, many of those, I remember meeting one at your event, one young lad, was it Boy? I can't remember, Boy, or one young lad who had gone into, a professional role, which must be hugely inspiring to see when you kind of remember back, and then you see these kids, in families, in jobs, and actually, in a life they hadn't probably envisaged, in any term at all.
Oh, absolutely. Like you met in those early days, Kunrochana, who came down from Bangkok, and she faced a battle with breast cancer in 2007, and we were able to financially support her into private healthcare or private hospital care, and it certainly saved her life at the time. But she then that metastasized and turned into bone cancer, and she passed away very sadly in 2000, or 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. But Game, who it might be that you met, he was the first of our students to graduate from uni, and he went on to he graduated with a law degree, and he came back as a student from the home to take the director's role of that Kunrochana had, and to see that, and to see the success of the kids that have left the home. We've got kids working in hospitality with 5-star properties across the globe. We got one of the girls who we supported with. She did a business degree, works in an advertising agency here in Sydney, and that's the thing that's, I think, is most satisfying is, and I think the best use of donors' money. And one is keeping the homes operating, keeping the kids fed and healthy, and providing medicine and all of that, and particularly for the HIV home that we took on in 2010. But to see the kids grow and flourish is, that's a real deep sense of satisfaction.
You there?
Yep.
Yeah, I dropped out. I think that was me that dropped out. Yeah, and I had, obviously now we're dealing with a, pretty unique situation for most people. And as I was kind of jotting down to what to chat to you about, I kind of wondered, this is obviously different to a tsunami, it's different to a natural disaster, but there are parallels, certainly with the societal response to it in many ways. Do you see that? Can you comment on that? Have you been, asked to do anything, or is this totally kind of out of your remit?
Yeah, I think there's a word that we've all heard, and it's unprecedented. People talk about it, and but every crisis or disaster that I've been involved in is unprecedented because of the unique factors of it. But the other thing is that the lessons and the challenges that we face in crisis are not unprecedented, and I think that there's real correlation between the challenges and the learnings that we took from what I saw in Thailand and what I saw in Japan and Saudi to what's been faced now by different leaders in government and health and business as well. And there's many lessons that we can take from different crises and just different disaster situations to help ourselves through these times.
Yeah, for sure. So, and it's not something I imagine you're more focused on, how to, support the charities in the best way right now, as I'm seeing, and get those through what's a tricky time. Yeah.
Yeah, look, personally, I work with different organisations and as you said, have been called upon to provide advice and so forth around that leadership and the experiences that we've had, and that continues. I'm working with one of the big banks here in Australia around advice to their leadership team and what's the lessons that we took from our time in these international crisis areas, and then also what can we expect? How do we move out and how do we lead our teams through these? And like our deployments in Thailand went for over 12 months. Like there was an international presence there from January through to February, 12 months later. And so that long-term sustainable commitment is something that is not new, and how you lead and manage teams through that. The lessons from then apply to now, and a lot of it's about providing detailed information, because with information you get understanding and understanding the energy flow that will go through, and I think we see that in Australia right now with the lockdown that we've had, as there was people certainly embraced it, and there was initially it was, well, this is all new, how's it going to work? And then we went into a stage of acceptance and understanding and compliance, and I think very quickly we're approaching a stage now where there's a level of complacency and lack of tolerance around it, and this is where a lot of work's going to be required by the leaders if they want to maintain it, to help people understand why. So it's, I think it's those 4 stages, and then obviously the exit, and how do we either finish or how do we provide continuity and so forth. It's something that I can look at our crisis response to somewhere where we might have been there for a couple of days through to a 13-month deployment in Thailand. I think there's so many parallels that exist, because really it's just about leading people through projects and change and crisis, and it doesn't matter whether it's a terrorism event, it's a viral infection like we got now, or something different like the humanitarian response in Thailand. The challenges contextually that we'll face, I think, are very similar.
Yeah, for sure. This whole theme of leadership, I know it's something that you're very focused on and have been right since those, experiences you went through in Bali and in Thailand. And certainly now, I'm speaking to a lot of different people every day, in a business sense, and you can see the importance in, certain values and skills emerging through, a situation like this, which is a bit of a segue to a story that I really wanted to probably prompt you to tell, because it's one of my favorite. I know that you have told this ever since Thailand. Thailand is a place that you know intimately now. It isn't a place you knew intimately when you touched down 15 years ago. And I think it was in your first book, you talk about, kind of breaking that cultural barrier, which is something that I'm personally really passionate about, breaking down barriers. And it's not always easy, right? When there's no language, there's, different backgrounds in terms of how you've been brought up. But I know that was a challenge you and the team faced, right? With the, I suppose it was the Thai military, right, that were doing the recovery effort. But yeah, can you just talk a little bit? I think you probably know the story I'm prompting. I love that story, and it's such an interesting, it's something that personally has inspired me in how you dealt with that, yourself and the team, in bridging those kind of cultural gaps at such a tricky time.
Yes, you're referring to working with the Thai soldiers, are you, at the temple?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I don't want to tell the story, so I better shut up because
yeah. No,
yeah,
that's
but
okay. Yeah, so we were at a place called Tata Chai, which is just north of the Saracen Bridge, connecting both Phuket Island and the mainland. And we'd established a site there where we moved all of the shipping containers from up at Wat Yan Yao, because the bodies were stored in shipping containers and frozen until we're identifying them. And it was a really big site at Tata Chai, and we had the Thai military there, and their role was to go into the shipping containers, lift the shipping containers off the shelves, put them on trolleys, and wheel them throughout the site. And you know, a pretty I guess difficult job just to keep doing day after day. And I think the biggest challenge that they faced was that they had no end in sight. And you talk about the current challenges that we're facing as a community right now. And the biggest thing I hear is people, and it's something that we face at hands, is not knowing when things will come to an end, when we'll be able to travel again, when we'll be able to return to normal. It's that unknown. And the Thai soldiers their role was to lift these bodies down, put them in the trolleys and wheel them throughout the site. They were working 12 hours a day, and they worked 7 days a week. And when they finished work each day, they'd camp overnight in the tents at the site. And they were certainly losing their enthusiasm for their work, and it's completely understandable. But the important part to the story was that their lack of enthusiasm or their lack of motivation as time went on, because some of them had been doing it for 6 and 7 months, and they didn't know when this would come to an end. And while we rotated in and out, so many of those guys, that was where they were. And tough conditions, and away from their families and homes. And as they lost their motivation, the productivity at the entire site started to decline, and we lost productivity. And it didn't matter that we had all of these forensic specialists and odontologists, biologists, and police specialists from around the world, but the productivity continued to decline. And I looked at it and felt responsible. And the first lesson I took was that as an organisation, we have to value the contribution of everyone. And it doesn't matter the technical competence. If we don't value the contribution of everyone, well, it'll fall over. And that's what was happening here. And the second thing I looked at was, well, how do I motivate these guys? And one of the things that the Thai people, they're incredibly passionate and incredibly patriotic. They love everything about their king, their queen, and the kingdom of Thailand. And what I saw would happen each day is that they would stand and sing the Thai national anthem, and at the start of each day, and all the international teams, we would line up behind them out of respect. And of course, we didn't sing. We didn't, it wasn't our national anthem. We didn't know the words, and it was in Thai. But I saw the passion, I saw the motivation that the soldiers had, and how deeply connected to this national anthem that they were. I saw when they were singing, they had their shoulders back and had really strong voices. But once they stopped singing, you'd see the physical change. Their shoulders would slump forward, and they'd skulk away under the palm trees, and I'd have to go out and find them and hunt them out to do the job again. And I looked at it and thought, well, and as the productivity was declining, I was the leader at the site, and I felt responsible for this. And I asked one of the guys I was working with to get me the words of the Thai national anthem. And as the Australian team, as we travelled to and from work each day, we learned to sing the Thai national anthem. And this particular day, we stood up, and we were behind the soldiers, and they started to sing, and the Australians all pulled out our song sheets, and we started to sing the Thai national anthem as well. And the Thai soldiers swung around and had this look of amazement on their face,
they would have been blown over, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely, I say, did we sing that national anthem well? Well, hell no. But did it matter? It had this, it had the desired effect, because the Thai soldiers saw that we connected with them on something that was so important to them in a real meaningful way. It wasn't about money. It wasn't around giving them anything. It was around connecting in a real in a way with integrity and honesty, and and from that point, the Thai soldiers were just so keen to do anything to support us and please us, because we demonstrated this shared alignment of values.
It's a really awesome story, and like I say, it's something that's inspired me. And there's massive lessons from that parallel into all areas of life, both personally and particularly in business, which I know you've gone on to, I'm sure, use that as a story to inspire leaders within companies, right? With how they work with employees, whether it's in different offices, different teams. So yeah.
Well, and I think Matt, like lots of businesses, particularly in the for-profit space and commercial space, reward their staff and their teams and so forth financially, and that's cool. Like, we all need that, but if that's your only motivator, if that's your key motivator, it can be a race to the bottom and a pretty shallow experience too. And I think it's for us, it wasn't an option to pay these soldiers more, or to do anything like that. But I don't think any money that we could have given them would have had the lasting and the deep impact of doing something that was so meaningful.
It's that whole, the meaning, whenever you do these things, the meaningful part of it, the purpose, the human connection is what you end up taking away. I remember when I visited the orphanage in Callao, which was brief but also dramatic in terms of my own life. It kind of just put things into perspective, mainly because those kids, after just a few years, had so much hope. And you kind of deal with people every day that often have things out of perspective, which no fault of their own, but you tend to deal with things within your own layer of perspective. But certainly when you're around these situations, and the amount of, I suppose, gratitude is probably the word, but for me it was really perspective, back in the other life, coming back to the
and I think with people that we continue to take over to Thailand and continue to have their own experiences, and with these bike rides that we've run for so many years, and we hear that those words that you talk about of gratitude and perspective, and it's not something that I talk to people that they will take from it, because I think it would almost sound arrogant to say you'll get perspective.
Sure, yeah.
And it's never something I lead with, but it's something that I hear people come back to me and say, this is what I've taken, even from when I'm sharing stories at conferences and so forth. They just say, it's just given me perspective. And it's really interesting. We had a group of about 80 real estate agents from Australia and New Zealand and the UK riding with us in Thailand in March of this year, and it was right amongst when the COVID started, and they returned to Australia at the end of the ride, having been ridden through Thailand, and such a beautiful country, and such a great way to see it on the back of a bicycle, and then arriving at the home, having gone through personal hardship and real challenge to get there, and then speaking to some of them when they'd come home, and they said it was really obvious the mindset that they were turning up to work with compared to those in the office who had not had this experience, and they were coming back with a real level of groundedness and perspective and calmness, and ready to face the challenges, because that's what they'd been doing on the bike for the last 10 days and doing things they'd never done before. And them feeding back to me saying, I'm just in such a better position to deal with this crisis that we're facing than my colleagues who are just seeing this as the biggest thing ever. And they're going, well, let's put it in perspective.
Yeah. As you know, I haven't done it for a couple of years, but I ran the walk for about 10 years, but very similar. It was it was taking people from that corporate environment, not necessarily, well, it's similar to the bike ride probably, because, we end up doing a little bit of volunteering and walking, but yes, it's so rewarding at a personal level when people come back and those kind of shifts. And like you say, it's not everyone, it's just certain people for certain reasons, I don't know, come back with a, real shift in how they see things. And very lucky to have experienced that, I think, myself, and seen other people go through that.
Yeah, for sure.
On I wanted to ask you about really the role of business. You've obviously, you've come from the police force. You've set up a charity. You've then, you know, you speak at businesses, at conferences, and then you do your CSR consulting. I mean, how do you see the role of business in the nonprofit sector? I have my own opinions on it. I think we've talked about it before, and I feel it's really changed in the last 20 years. Like, you used to have charity and you had nonprofit, and I always feel the lines are blurring. And I think
Okay.
personally, after what's happening now, I think they will blur even more. I think, obviously there is for-profit and non-profit for reasons of structure and, business models. But, how do you see the role of business going into the future when it comes to charity, and do you see those lines kind of merging?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think we do share a lot of values or thoughts on this, Matt, from the conversations we've had together over the last 10 or 12 years or so forth. And I think I think my work in this area within the CSR is that there's basically two groups or two approaches to it. One is around, and I'm talking the relationship between business and charity at the moment. And I see that there's either a philanthropic approach where business gives charity money and they think that's the beginning and basically the end of it. And then there's the true corporate social responsibility approach where you have shared value from through the entire supply chain. And I think that's the area that interests me, is where we can turn that relationship for the business and for the charity, one into more of an even footing, and one where it becomes a positive growth centre for a profit centre for the business, as opposed to a cost centre. And it's something that I wrote a lot about in the book Doing Good by Doing Good, which I published a number of years ago. And it was interesting. I didn't come from this CSR background, and that's not my. I wasn't in corporate. I was police, crisis, and then formed a charity. So I didn't come with the learnings and the knowledge, and in some way the bias of what had gone before. And I basically just went my own way because everything was so new. I'd never been involved in charity before, but what I quickly learned was that for Hands Across the Water, the charity, to exist and grow and have relevance, we couldn't rely upon sympathy. There's 60,000 charities in Australia, and I'd suggest to you that most of them are doing a good thing and can and should be supported. So how were we ever going to have presence and relevance in Australia if all I was doing, was relying upon the stories of the tsunami? And so very quickly I learnt that for us to get supporters, both individual, business and corporate, and retain them, was we needed to be more of a service provider, and we needed to be providing individuals, business and larger organisations with value and return to them. And that was kind of what I started then, is this consulting around what I picked up as CSR. And I guess it was somewhat or quite unique in that I had Wiley, which is Australia's biggest business book publisher, come to me and say, would you write a book on it? Because what you're doing, no one in Australia has written anything around this. There's a lot of text out of the US, but it's a very different feel. And we actually debated for months before I agreed and wrote the book. But it was really upon the relationship between business and Matt, the time that we're in now is the best example of what I've been talking about for ever since I wrote the book. Because what we're seeing now in the conversations that I'm having with charity and business is that if the relationship has been one based upon a philanthropic approach, if it's that when we look at it on the balance sheet, that the support of their favourite charity is a cost centre to the business, right now businesses are saying, where do we cut costs? I guarantee you the first thing that they're looking at is the charity relationship, and then the L&D and these type of costs, which are seen as discretionary spends. And the risk, and this is what happens, is that in these types of times, this is when people lean inwards and rely upon charity most. when we've got unemployment rates pushing through 10% in Australia, when we've got increased poverty and homelessness and those type of things that are going to occur, they're relying upon the charities. But if the charities in the most, dire need are then having their funding cut because business can't afford to support them, well, it's a downward spiral. And what it does is confirm that I've been talking about and advising business on for many years now, is that we have to turn the relationship into one that it's a profit center for the business. And that profit center can be around customer retention, staff attraction, brand differentiation, new markets, new products, all of these type of things. And because there's a natural response when we say you should profit from charities, people say, well, that's not why I do it. I don't do it to get anything back. And part of it is I call bullshit on that, because we all do things as a driver within us, but people feel as though they shouldn't be expecting a return. But where I come from within the charity sector, I know that if you're supporting me as a business leader, as a CEO, or as an individual, if it's important to you, if it's contributing to your personal or business growth, you'll stay invested. And so right now, it's a case, and sometimes some in the business world, and now I think two things will happen in this current community. And from those that I'm speaking to, they'll say now is not the time, and others who have a more strategic view and a longer term view and can be open to this beyond the philanthropic space, is now is absolutely the time to invest in this, because when we come out, we know, and particularly with the new generation, there's a consciousness that consumers are attaching to their purchases. We've got graduates coming out of universities who are saying, I'm looking at an accounting firm, for example, and saying, I want to know what you offer around me being able to pursue what's important to me. We know that people are taking jobs based upon what the organisations are offering from a social point of view. And if they're not doing it well, they're not attracting the best talent. And all of this contributes to a business doing well. And that's the space it can offer. And I think that there's got to be a shift. And if now's not the impetus for it, well, I don't know what will be.
I think you're absolutely right. And I honestly think in many ways it was already like this. So I think this, you hit on a couple of points there. The business cases were there actually, but people just weren't exposed to them or understood them.
Yeah.
You just talked about taking employees on a bike ride and they come back to the office. I mean, when I was in a kind of structured corporate job, if I had that stuff introduced to me rather than me introducing to myself, I wouldn't have left that company. I'll be with them 10 years later. Yeah. And I think there was just not the research before. And there's probably more of a focus with the millennial and Gen Z, generations in terms of, like you say, now there is research. So it becomes a business case, but I don't know if it was that it wasn't before. It's just that, now people know because of data. And yeah, certainly I think I'm hearing what you're saying through the conversations I have. There's a real divide there actually between people who see the future and are positive about this kind of symbiotic relationship and the need to kind of fix based on good partnerships where there is, pay each way. And I don't mean money, but there's a payback each way versus the old model. And the old model, like you say, will drop away. I mean, it can't survive in a time like this because it's the first thing you take off the, off the balance sheet. There's a bird in my house just come in, so hopefully it doesn't fly into the computer, but the wonders of living in the country. I'm pretty much at the end, kind of covered what I wanted to cover. And, I just, before we knock off, really was keen just to ask you about, I know that, you're having to pivot like many businesses are. You're looking at different ways of doing things. I know you have a strong focus on, physical activities that raise a substantial amount of, funding for your charities out here, your bike rides that you do, a number each year with leaders, CEOs in Australia. So I know I've just seen some stuff on social media. You're looking at kind of pivoting that into something new. Do you want to just talk about that for a minute so our listeners understand it and how they can get involved if they want to?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Matt. As you say, the big focus for us has been on leading shared experiences and having people riding bikes in Thailand. And our passports are all locked away at the moment. And and that's had a significant impact on our ability to raise funds. So what we've done is we've created a virtual bike ride. So we've mapped it, and through a couple of different platforms, we'll have riders can jump on, and they can be from anywhere in the world, jump on as part of this 30-day challenge in June, where they ride 800 kilometres, which is from Phetchaburi, south of Bangkok, down to Khao Lak, and it's the ride that we do.
Awesome.
It's been recorded on GoPro as we speak. So the riders each day will jump on either at 7 a.m. or midday, and they will ride that length of road that we would be riding. So they get to see the sights and feel the road as they ride. They can do it from the comfort of their lounge room, from the garage or wherever, or even if you're out riding a bike through your own neighbourhood and where you normally ride on the road, through Strava, all that data collects as well. So it's a virtual challenge, and for the month of June, we'll have some great guests who will be contributing and talking with the groups, because there's the option of being in our Zoom room where you ride with a couple of hundred other people and
awesome.
Hear from special guests. And we've got some amazing people who are going to be interviewed during the rides. And it's only $49 to sign up, and we're asking the riders to raise $500. And you look at that and say, is it the right time to raise money? And you break it down, it's $16 a day that you need to get someone to support you. And if we haven't got 30 friends with $16, we probably need to expand our social network.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you say, people will say it's at the right time, but when people have been involved in these things before, it lifts the spirits, it keeps people motivated, it, gives you something else to, be positive about. So
yeah,
cool.
For sure.
Yeah, best of luck with that. I can't do it from here, I don't think, but maybe there's another way I can get involved. I'll have a look. Maybe I can pivot it another way and walk it. It's a bit far to walk though. So
yeah, just get on a spin bike. That's all you got to do.
All right. I don't think there's one in my little town here, but I'll see what I can do. I'd love to get involved. So
good on you, mate.
Cool. All right, Pete, it's been really good to chat, and look forward to hopefully catching up face to face, either here in Thailand or in Australia at some point.
For sure. Thanks, Matt. Good to chat.
Cool. All the best,
See you,
mate.
buddy. Bye, mate.
Yes.
Bye.